Millions of Americans have reached into a jar of old pocket change, sifted through a handful of mixed coins, and pulled out a piece of currency adorned with two simple stalks of wheat. At first glance, a wheat penny from the early 1940s might seem like nothing more than a relic of a bygone era, a humble copper piece that has long outlived the hands that originally spent it. Yet seasoned numismatists recognize that these tiny artifacts are far more than outdated currency. They are miniature time capsules that quietly witnessed one of the most transformative, turbulent, and consequential decades in modern human history. The early 1940s were defined by global conflict, massive economic mobilization, and profound national sacrifice, all of which directly influenced the United States Mint and the physical characteristics of the coins it produced. While novice collectors often assume that age alone dictates value, the reality of the numismatic market is far more complex and demanding. The true story of these coins is told through a delicate balance of historical significance, precise metallic composition, extraordinary preservation, and authenticated originality. Today, we are taking a closer look at three specific years of the Wheat Penny series that bridge the gap between a fragile peace, a state of total war, and the dawn of a new post-war era. By understanding the intricate details of their manufacture, the subtle variations in their strike quality, and the uncompromising standards of professional grading, you will discover why a few exceptional examples command thousands of dollars at public auction, while millions of others are worth little more than their raw metallic weight. This investigation reveals the hidden nuances that separate an ordinary circulated find from a genuinely elite museum-quality collector's piece. 1941, Wheat Penny. The year 1941 represents the tense calm before the storm in the United States, a critical period when the nation was rapidly industrializing its workforce in response to the growing conflict across the Atlantic, yet still technically remaining at peace. The wheat penny struck during this pivotal year reflects the traditional, uncompromising standards of the United States Mint before wartime material shortages forced unprecedented metallurgical compromises. The obverse features the enduring stoic portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, originally designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. The reverse proudly displays the iconic twin wheat stalks framing the 1-cent denomination, a design intended to symbolize national prosperity and agricultural strength. These specific coins were struck using the classic, long-standing bronze alloy consisting of 95% copper combined with 5% tin and zinc. This precise metallurgical recipe gave them a standard weight of 3.11 grams and a uniform diameter of 19.05 millimeters. Production across the country was incredibly robust, with hundreds of millions of pieces rolling off the heavy presses at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mint facilities. Philadelphia issues bear no mint mark, while those produced out west proudly display a small D or S punched directly beneath the date. Because the mintages were so massive, the 1941 wheat penny remains an incredibly common coin in lower circulated grades. Countless examples passed through cash registers, funded the daily purchases of a nation on the brink of war, and were worn smooth by decades of commerce. Consequently, experienced collectors do not evaluate these coins based on the scarcity of their original production, but rather entirely on the extreme scarcity of their survival in pristine condition. Professional third-party grading services apply the internationally recognized Sheldon grading scale, which ranges from 1 to 70 to evaluate every subtle characteristic of a coin's condition. For a 1941 wheat penny, the journey from an ordinary circulated piece to a highly coveted condition rarity is strictly tied to original mint luster and flawless surface preservation. Copper is an inherently highly reactive metal, meaning that once it enters circulation, it rapidly oxidizes, reacting to oxygen, humidity, and the natural oils present on human skin. This process turns the coin from a brilliant, glowing red to a dark, muddy, and visually flat brown. Coins that have somehow survived in uncirculated condition with their original full red color intact are exceedingly difficult to locate. A certified Mint State 67 full red example represents a statistical anomaly, a coin that miraculously escaped the heavy friction of commerce, the destructive elements of the environment, and the careless handling of previous generations. When evaluating these elite survivors, specialists pay incredibly close attention to the sharpness of Lincoln's hair, the definition of his cheekbone and beard, and the crisp, raised lines of the wheat ears on the reverse. Softly struck examples, even if they remain uncirculated, will never achieve the highest grades because they lack the necessary visual impact. For those exceptional pieces that combine flawless, mark-free surfaces with blazing original color, auction results can be staggering, sometimes reaching between 1,500 and 3,000 depending on the precise numerical grade, the coin's overall eye appeal, and the intensity of collector competition. Beyond immaculate preservation, the 1941 series is also scrutinized for a handful of intriguing die varieties, most notably subtle double dies on the obverse lettering. However, genuine mint errors from this year require strict expert authentication. Many inexperienced buyers are easily misled by machine doubling, a highly common, completely valueless, striking anomaly caused by a loose die, or environmental damage masquerading as a valuable mint error. True numismatic value is always firmly grounded in verified authenticity, which is why serious, high-end collectors rely exclusively on coins encapsulated in tamper-evident headers by respected third-party grading organizations. These independent experts rigorously verify that the coin has not been artificially cleaned, aggressively polished, or chemically altered to simulate a false shine, thereby protecting the integrity of the marketplace and ensuring that spectacular prices are paid only for genuinely spectacular, historically intact coins. 1942. Wheat penny. By the time the calendar turned to 1942, the stark reality of the Second World War had fundamentally altered the American landscape, and the United States Mint was forced to rapidly adapt to a heavily restricted wartime economy. Copper, the foundational component of the wheat penny, was suddenly classified by the federal government as a critical strategic material, desperately needed for manufacturing millions of ammunition shell casings, miles of vital communication wire, and other essential military equipment for the troops overseas. The 1942 wheat penny represents the final year of the traditional pre-war bronze composition before the mint drastically and somewhat controversially transitioned to the famous zinc-coated steel pennies of 1943. Struck in the familiar 95% copper alloy weighing exactly 3.11 grams, the 1942 production run was executed under immense, unrelenting pressure. The mint facilities operated around the clock, pushing their machinery and personnel to the absolute limit to meet the soaring coinage demands of a rapidly expanding wartime workforce. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all contributed heavily to the massive national output, resulting in hundreds of millions of coins flooding into circulation. Because of this high-speed, high-volume production environment, overall strike quality became increasingly inconsistent. Working dies were frequently pushed far beyond their optimal lifespans before being replaced, leading to a massive population of coins with noticeably weak, mushy details, particularly in the higher relief areas of Lincoln's portrait and the intricate, delicate lines of the wheat ears. This harsh manufacturing reality is precisely what makes high-grade collecting of the 1942 issue so endlessly fascinating and challenging. Finding a 1942 wheat penny is incredibly easy. Finding one that was perfectly struck from fresh, newly installed dies and preserved flawlessly for over 8 decades is a monumental, almost impossible task. Advanced numismatists examine these specific coins with microscopic precision. They look for uninterrupted cartwheel luster that flows cleanly and brightly across the fields, completely free of the microscopic carbon spots, specks of verdigris or dark toning streaks that frequently plague copper issues from this turbulent era. The official color designation assigned by graders plays an enormous role in the coin's market valuation. A coin graded Mint State 66 brown might sell for a very modest, affordable premium, while that exact same coin graded Mint State 66 full red can command hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The massive premium assigned to original red color reflects the immense scientific difficulty of preserving copper without it succumbing to natural atmospheric toning or environmental degradation. A truly spectacular 1942 wheat penny, certified in a lofty, nearly perfect grade like Mint State 67 or 68. Full red is a true condition rarity that consistently sparks fierce, uncompromising bidding wars among registry set collectors. These dedicated individuals are attempting to build the absolute finest, highest rated collections in existence. And they understand that upgrading a single slot in their set requires competing for a fraction of a percent of the total surviving population. Verified auction records for these absolute pinnacle examples have occasionally surpassed the $4,000 mark, vividly illustrating the vast, undeniable chasm between a coin's face value and its true numismatic worth. In addition to condition rarities, the 1942 series offers specialists several verified, highly sought-after mint errors, including repunched mint marks, dramatic off-center strikes, and coins struck through stray debris on the mint floor. Yet the same rigid caution applies. Independent authentication is absolutely paramount. The modern coin collecting hobby is unfortunately filled with coins that have been subjected to abrasive polishing, harsh chemical dips, or even baking soda scrubs in a misguided, destructive attempt to restore their original shine. Such crude alterations completely strip the coin of its natural, original surfaces, permanently damaging the metal and rendering it essentially worthless to any serious collector. The true enduring beauty of a high-grade 1942 wheat penny lies entirely in its untouched originality, serving as a pristine, surviving artifact from a year when the entire nation mobilized its resources, its industries, and its people for the defense of the free world. 1945 wheat penny. The year 1945 brought the long-awaited triumphant conclusion to the Second World War, and the wheat penny struck during this historic year carries its own unique, fascinating metallurgical story. Following the highly problematic and ultimately failed experiment with zinc-coated steel in 1943, the United States Mint desperately needed a way to resume copper coin production without depleting the nation's still vital strategic reserves. The solution was an ingenious, massive national recycling program. The Mint began melting down millions of salvaged artillery shell casings retrieved from military training facilities and distant battlefields to provide the necessary copper for the nation's change. This special, historically significant, shell casing bronze composition was utilized exclusively in 1944 and 1945. It consisted of 95% copper and 5% zinc, entirely omitting the small amount of tin that had traditionally been part of the pre-war alloy. Although the overall weight remained at the standard 3.11 grams and the physical dimensions were identical to earlier issues, the complete absence of tin and the trace impurities left over from the fired ammunition casings gave the 1945 wheat penny a slightly different metallic behavior during the high-pressure striking process. These coins often display a distinct, slightly yellowish brass hue when viewed in fully uncirculated condition, separating them visually from the rich, deep, coppery red of the pre-war years. The production of the 1945 wheat penny was truly astronomical, with well over 1 billion pieces struck across the 3 mint facilities to fuel the booming celebratory post-war economy. Given this staggering record-breaking mintage, it is crucial to emphasize that a circulated 1945 wheat penny is one of the most common, readily available coins a person can possibly find. They are abundant in old jars, estate sales, and inherited collections, usually worn down to a smooth, dark, chocolate brown finish with heavily flattened details. The value of these heavily circulated pieces is tied strictly to their copper content or their intangible sentimental worth. However, the narrative shifts dramatically and aggressively when we enter the absolute upper echelons of the Sheldon grading scale. Because the recycled shell casing alloy was slightly harder and less malleable on the minting equipment, finding a 1945 wheat penny with a needle-sharp, fully realized strike is surprisingly difficult. Many uncirculated examples suffer from soft, mushy details on the tips of the wheat stalks, a weak rendering of the O in 1 cent on the reverse, or poorly defined hair on Lincoln's head. For a discerning collector, identifying a piece with fully realized design elements, brilliant, uninterrupted luster, and a flawless full red designation is an exhilarating, challenging pursuit. When elite examples do finally surface, coins that somehow survive the jubilant, chaotic celebrations of 1945 and were immediately tucked away into dark, perfectly climate-controlled environments. They command immense respect and serious financial commitment from the numismatic community. An authenticated Mint State 67 or Mint State 68. Full red example is a highly prized target for registry set builders who demand nothing short of perfection. Exceptional pieces displaying pristine surfaces and superior eye appeal have crossed the auction block for upwards of $3,500 to $5,000 under aggressive, highly competitive bidding conditions. Beyond absolute condition, the massive 1945 issue is also heavily scrutinized for striking anomalies like off-center strikes, broad strikes, and clipped planchets, which occurred frequently when the massive production quotas inevitably led to overworked machinery and quality control failures on the mint floor. But as always, separating a genuinely rare mint-made error from post-mint mechanical damage or intentional manipulation is a task that requires a trained eye and the uncompromising backing of a reputable third-party grading service. For anyone fortunate enough to own a beautifully preserved, high-grade 1945 wheat penny, the rules of preservation are strict and unforgiving. Never handle the coin by its faces, avoid any form of wiping or chemical cleaning, and store the piece exclusively in an archival quality inert plastic holder. This level of extreme care prevents moisture, oxygen, and environmental contaminants from destroying the coin's fragile original surfaces. Ultimately, these coins represent the closing chapter of a tumultuous era, permanently transforming the destructive remnants of wartime ammunition into enduring, beautiful symbols of American resilience, economic recovery, and everyday commerce.